The morning of March 15th started like any other day for Miguel Rodriguez, a decorated Army veteran who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He kissed his wife goodbye, hugged his 3 children, and headed out to his job at the local Veterans Hospital in Phoenix, Arizona, where he worked as a counselor helping other veterans transition back to civilian life. Little did he know that by noon his entire world would be turned upside down, and his story would become a viral sensation that would expose a shocking reality about how America treats some of its own heroes. Miguel had always considered himself the embodiment of the American dream. Born in California 38 years ago, he grew up in a military family with his father having served in Vietnam. When he turned 18, joining the Army felt like the most natural thing in the world. He excelled in his service, earning a Bronze Star for his actions during a particularly dangerous mission in Kandahar, province where he saved the lives of 3 fellow soldiers under heavy fire. His commanding officers described him as the kind of soldier every unit needs. Someone who put his brothers and sisters in arms before himself every single time. But on that Tuesday morning, as Miguel was conducting a group therapy session with fellow veterans struggling with PTSD, his phone began buzzing incessantly. He ignored it at first, maintaining his professional focus on the men and women who needed his help. When the session ended, he finally checked his messages and felt his blood run cold. His neighbor had sent him a video from their doorbell camera showing ICE agents at his home, questioning his terrified wife while his children watched from the window. The nightmare that would consume the next several months of Miguel's life had officially begun. Racing home, he found his wife Maria in tears, holding a notice that ICE had left behind. The document claimed there were questions about Miguel's citizenship status that required immediate investigation. This was particularly bewildering because Miguel had always believed he was a natural-born citizen. His birth certificate said Los Angeles, California. His Social Security card had been issued when he was a child. He had a United States passport that he'd used to deploy overseas to defend his country. What Miguel didn't know was that a recent audit of military personnel records had flagged his file due to a discrepancy in his parents' documentation from the late 1980s. His mother, who had passed away 5 years earlier, had apparently been undocumented when she gave birth to him, though she later became a legal permanent resident. His father was a citizen, but a clerical error decades ago had created a paperwork nightmare that was only now coming to light. The complexity of birthright citizenship laws and the specific circumstances of his birth had created what immigration lawyers would later call a perfect storm of bureaucratic confusion. The irony wasn't lost on Miguel or the thousands of supporters who would later rally to his cause. Here was a man who had literally bled for America, who had watched friends die in service to the flag, who had dedicated his post-military life to helping other veterans heal from the invisible wounds of war. Yet suddenly he was being treated like a criminal, like someone who didn't belong in the only country he had ever known or loved. The story might have ended there, lost in the bureaucratic maze of immigration enforcement, if not for Miguel's 18-year-old daughter Sophia, a freshman at Arizona State University studying journalism. Sophia possessed both her father's courage and her generation's understanding of social media's power. That evening, as her father sat at the kitchen table surrounded by military commendations and photographs from his service, trying to make sense of the incomprehensible, Sophia began documenting everything. Her first TikTok video was simple but powerful. She held up her father's Bronze Star and said, "This is what my dad earned defending America in Afghanistan. Today, ICE came to our door saying he might not be American enough." The video exploded overnight, garnering 3 million views in less than 24 hours. The hashtag veteran and ICE nightmare began trending, and suddenly Miguel's story wasn't just a private family crisis anymore. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. Veterans organizations across the country issued statements of support. Miguel's former commanding officer, now a retired general, went on national television to vouch for his character and service. "This man saved American lives," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "He's more American than most people I know, regardless of what any piece of paper says." But the legal reality was more complicated than public sentiment. Immigration law doesn't make exceptions for military service when it comes to citizenship questions. Miguel found himself caught in a Kafkaesque situation, where his lifetime of service meant nothing in the face of bureaucratic technicalities. He was required to report to ICE offices weekly, each visit a humiliating reminder that his status in the country he'd fought for was suddenly uncertain. The emotional toll on the family was devastating. Miguel's youngest son, just 8 years old, began having nightmares about his father being taken away. His middle child stopped wearing the army t-shirts he'd always worn proudly to school. Maria, who had her own successful career as a nurse, took a leave of absence to help coordinate the legal battle that was draining their savings at an alarming rate. The family that had once been the picture of American success was now living in constant fear. 3 weeks into the ordeal, something extraordinary happened. A group of Miguel's fellow veterans from his unit organized a protest outside the ICE facility in Phoenix. What started as a dozen former soldiers quickly grew to hundreds, then thousands. Veterans from World War II to the recent conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan stood shoulder to shoulder, many in their old uniforms, holding signs that read, "Deport us too if serving doesn't make you American, and brothers in arms means forever." The images from that protest became iconic. One photo in particular, showing a 93-year-old World War II veteran saluting Miguel as he arrived for his mandatory check-in, was shared millions of times across social media platforms. Celebrities began weighing in, with major Hollywood figures and musicians calling for justice. The story had transcended political lines, with Americans from all backgrounds united in their outrage over the treatment of someone who had sacrificed so much for their country. Behind the scenes, a team of pro bono immigration lawyers had taken up Miguel's case, working around the clock to untangle the decades-old bureaucratic knot. They discovered that similar cases had occurred before, though none had received this level of public attention. The precedents were mixed, offering both hope and concern. Some veterans in similar situations had successfully resolved their status, while others had been deported to countries they'd never known. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A retired ICE employee named Dorothy Chen, who had processed immigration paperwork in Los Angeles during the 1980s, saw the story on the news and recognized Miguel's mother's name. She remembered the case because it had been unusual, and she had kept meticulous personal records throughout her career. Queued in her files, she found documentation that proved Miguel's mother had actually been in the process of legalization when he was born, a crucial detail that had been lost in the transition to digital records. This discovery didn't immediately solve everything, but it provided the legal team with the ammunition they needed to argue Miguel's case more effectively. Combined with the mounting public pressure and the intervention of several members of Congress, including surprisingly bipartisan support, ICE agreed to suspend enforcement action while a thorough review was conducted. The relief in the Rodriguez household was palpable but tentative. They knew they weren't out of the woods yet. The review process could take months, possibly years, and there was no guarantee of a favorable outcome. But for the first time since that terrible March morning, they could breathe a little easier. Miguel returned to work at the Veterans Hospital, where he was greeted with a standing ovation from both staff and patients. The national conversation, sparked by Miguel's case, led to proposed legislation called the Veteran Citizenship Assurance Act, which would provide expedited paths to citizenship confirmation for military service members and veterans. While the bill faced political challenges, the fact that it was even being discussed represented a significant shift in how America was thinking about immigration, citizenship, and the value of military service. As Miguel's story continued to unfold, it became clear that he was not alone. Investigations revealed that hundreds, possibly thousands, of veterans faced similar citizenship uncertainties. Many had been living in fear for years, afraid to speak up lest they draw attention to themselves. Miguel's public fight had given them hope, and, more importantly, a voice. Support groups formed, legal clinics specifically for veterans with immigration issues were established, and a national database was created to help track and assist these cases. 6 months after that first knock on his door, Miguel received word that his citizenship had been officially confirmed. The government acknowledged that administrative errors, not any wrongdoing on his or his family's part, had created the confusion. Standing in his backyard surrounded by his family and fellow veterans, Miguel held the official documentation confirming what he had always known in his heart. He was an American. But Miguel's fight wasn't over. He had become an inadvertent spokesperson for a cause he never knew existed. He began traveling the country, speaking at veterans events and immigration forums, sharing his story and advocating for others in similar situations. His daughter Sophia, inspired by the impact of her social media campaign, changed her major to immigration law, determined to prevent other families from experiencing what hers had endured. The story of Miguel Rodriguez serves as a powerful reminder that patriotism isn't determined by paperwork, but by actions and sacrifice. It highlights the complex intersection of immigration policy and military service in modern America. Most importantly, it demonstrates the power of community, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the profound impact that ordinary citizens can have when they refuse to accept injustice. Miguel's nightmare had indeed gone public, but in doing so, it awakened a nation to a problem that had been hiding in plain sight, affecting the very people who had sworn to defend it with their lives.